Hello and welcome to Move the Line. Ryan Newton, joined here as always by Connor Allen. And as always, during this time of year, as we get closer to draft day, is our friend Scott Smith, fresh off of posting Mock Draft 1.0, in between just gallivanting all over the country, training UFC fighters, just obviously general badass as well in the draft space. As always, love doing this with Scott every year. Scott, what's going on, buddy?
Nothing much, man. Just happy to be home. First time in about 3 weeks. So it's been Vegas, it's been Mexico, it's been a few other places outside of the country. So look, just first show of the season and draft season. We're getting into this a little bit late, but it's time to get things rolling. So
yeah, I'm excited. I mean, some markets, unfortunately, mostly just on DraftKings, which I know can be tough limit wise, but start to get a sense of maybe some stuff that'll come out, some prices, some news that's been impactful. Obviously, a very busy free agency period as of late. I know Connor, you knocked out a show last week touching on some of the news on free agency and stuff like that. What's going on with you, buddy?
Yeah, not much. Yeah, Miko and I did a show last week, just talking about all the different like free agent impacts and everything. And I think the consensus we came to is at the top of the board, none of it really mattered. But there was a couple of teams towards the middle and bottom that where it definitely makes mattered a ton in terms of what direction they're going to go. So yeah, I mean overall, still a lot of fluidity. I think at the top, still a lot of uncertainty. I mean all over the board, especially in a class where there's just not that many good players, in my opinion. There's a lot of good players, but I just don't know how many great players are there. And I think that impacts, picks 6 to 25 dramatically.
Yeah, that was kind of their thing. A key takeaway in the first show that we did without Scott was just like, we look at the discrepancies, and shout out to our boy Vegas Refund.
Yes.
We got you. I heard you.
Okay.
VR's got that sheet that he puts out, and it's just the gap between so many spots that these guys land on the sheet in terms of where you're looking at different mock drafts. Like there's just such a range for some of these guys. So you think it's going to be one of those really interesting years, from a mock draft standpoint, just really tough to kind of land some of these guys, because you'll see people going, in the top 10 on the mock draft, and you can see them out of someone else's mock complete in the first round or like barely in the first round. And, maybe we get more of a consensus as we go through pro days. I know that's Scott does a lot of work there. I think we have an Alabama pro day today. There's some other ones coming up here on deck that just kind of create stuff. One of the big shifts since the last time we met, Connor, was we're seeing a lot of Abdul Carter at the 101. We've seen pretty much a shift to the Titans, I guess, staying at 1 with Cam Ward. You look at DraftKings has current number 1 pick odds, Cam Ward minus 800. So that's a pretty sizable shift from the last time that we spoke. That seems like an aggressive price, but I understand why we're there. We very much seems to be a consensus that Cam Ward is the clear quarterback 1. Just a lot going on at the top here too. Going to get started. I don't care where we want to take this, but any thoughts on Cam Ward? Any thoughts on how that's kind of shifted with the Titans at the top?
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting, kind of, I think, whirlwind here for Cam Ward. It's, initially expected. We have the GM with a way longer leash, Titans GM just recently hired. Like there was thought that, okay, well, they can take a blue chip player like Abdul Carter, wait on a quarterback, just kind of like, again, build a good team around a potential future quarterback. But the thing is I think what they're realizing is they're probably not going to have the number 1 pick overall pick again, hopefully. Like they're not sure when the next quarterback could come around. So if they like Cam Ward, you probably got to just take your guy and just sit there and take your guy, or make a massive trade down, kind of like the Bears did, and then hope to get lucky again, in future years. So yeah, I think that right now we're seeing, Schefter saying he would be shocked if Cam Ward wasn't the first overall pick. Daniel Jeremiah saying the Ward's going to go number 1. Jeremy Fowler said today that meetings with the Titans have gone well for Ward. I think minus 800 is steep, to be honest. Like you said, like I think that's tough considering, I don't know, it hasn't been like Cam Ward some shoe-in number 1 pick, since the beginning. Like as of now, I think it's probably Ward, but I think there's still a little bit of uncertainty.
Yeah, but it feels like a weird spot to trade up as well, unless someone really loves Ward. The quarterback situation In terms of teams that are desperately needing a starter, like, a young quarterback. It's, probably the two teams sitting right behind Tennessee, with the Browns needing to make some sort of decision. And then obviously the Giants as well. You can see the Raiders getting involved, I suppose, too. But like, in terms of, that still probably lands Cam Ward at number one, right? So even though like minus 800 is steep, it does make a ton of sense. You're looking at maybe the last week or so, a dozen plus mock drafts, and we're seeing like two that don't have Cam Ward at the top there. Scott, any thought to the number one overall pick? Talking about it for the first time from you this year.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's the Jaden Daniel effect all over again. Cam Ward's got a little bit of a similar skill set as far as that, and we get these lulls every few years where the quarterback talent isn't as good as what it was the year before, but you have a team like Tennessee who needs a quarterback, and they're sitting here at the top. And I think you look at what Jaden Daniels did last year for Washington, being able to turn that team around. And I think GMs get starry-eyed thinking that, maybe they can go ahead and strike while the iron's hot and get a guy like Cam Ward who, while a lot of analysts don't think that he's as good as what Jaden Daniels is and as good as a prospect, I think they're hoping to kind of hit lightning in a bottle and turn their franchise around that way. And Tennessee's just in a situation where they really don't have much else. You look at the quarterbacks that are out there on the market and free agency, and there's nobody that's going to turn the franchise around. So with no guarantee that you're going to be here again next year for the Arch Mannings and some of the other prospects that could be there in a better quarterback class, I think they're in a situation where they almost have to go Cam Ward.
And they've had a nice offseason in terms of, I think Dan Moore and Kevin Zeitler are starting caliber NFL offensive linemen they've added. They've addressed the offensive line back-to-back years in the first round. So they're at least putting in some parameters that could support a QB investment early, if that tends to make sense. The Browns are interesting too. Colin, I shared this in a chat this morning. I don't know if you saw that or if you had any interpretation, but it was a very interesting conversation with Andrew Siciliano, who covers the Browns, and Myles Garrett, who had a big switch in terms of get me out of here versus I'm going to take all your money. And I kind of feel good about some of the stuff I'm hearing from us internally about what we're doing in terms of roster building, and the quarterback position specifically was what the question was phrased. And I interpreted that very much as someone that's saying that was comfortable with whatever he was told. That to me isn't Mason Rudolph. That isn't, plucking Kirk Cousins. Like, that seemed to be someone who's like, it's one of those, like, I think we made the analogy before, like this box or the boat. It's like, it might even be a boat. It's like, it might be Shedeur Sanders. There's a lot of questions about Shedeur Sanders, but right now it's like, we don't really know what Shedeur Sanders could be, right? So there's just probably nothing in terms of like from a player standpoint. Like if I'm thinking about Myles Garrett, it's probably nothing about optimism in terms of what the upside of someone with that pedigree could be. My interpretation of that very, very much was they're taking Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders at whoever's there, one or two. Do you have a thought on that? Is that how you interpreted that at all, or anything to add to the Browns quarterback discussion?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he signed a long-term contract and was asked about the future of the quarterback position and was like, I feel good about who we're going to get. I think it was like, I feel good. The way it was phrased was like, they're not done adding, so they're going to get someone else. And so yeah. I don't know. Can they even afford Russell Wilson in any sense? Like, I don't think they can. They don't have any more cap space, like, at all. So it has to be a rookie, right? Like, and if that happens, like, you're not going to feel good about who you're going to get in the second round. Like, I don't know. Like, to me, it's one of those things where the more I think about it, it's probably Shedeur or Cam Ward, whoever's there too. There was another Jeremy Fowler quote today that was like that Shedeur has plenty of fans in the building with the Browns, but they just weren't sure whether that was going to be in the, enough to take him in the first round at 1.02. We hear that every year. Like, it happened with Bo Nix. We knew that Bo Nix had fans in the building. We're just like, oh, they're probably no way they're going to do it at 112. They do it. Daniel Jones, when he was drafted by the Giants. Michael Penix, we didn't really know. But, I think Bo Nix is probably a more, clear example of, like, if you like your quarterback, if you need a quarterback, you're probably just going to pick him in the first round. You're not going to let anyone else have a chance. So, and obviously all the parallels between, Deion, Browns OC, Bill Musgrave, played together with 49ers. Pat Shurmur, Kevin Stefanski worked together. Shurmur was OC at Colorado. I'm probably going to mention that 3 more times throughout draft season, but I think these things matter. I
think it matters.
All these little things matter. So, yeah, like right now, and I almost don't even want to say this because I'm not sure, because the latest hype has been, I'm not sure if they're going to take a quarterback, which maybe, Brown's first position drafted right now on DK is -120 quarterback.
Yep. Yeah, I have on the list. I have a couple that I think are pretty interesting, and that's definitely one. Scott, any thoughts on what the Browns do there too? I mean, obviously the mock that you put out today, you have them selecting Abdul Carter. Talking about Russell specifically as a bridge QB. Any thoughts on the Browns and what they do at 2?
Yeah, right now I have Abdul Carter, just because I think he's the better talent than Shedeur Sanders. But everything you mentioned makes a lot of sense. And Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward are both players that they've been heavily involved with throughout the process. They've had top 30 visits scheduled. They met with them at the combine. So they're definitely doing their homework. And it's important enough to see whether or not they're going to feel comfortable with, who Shedeur Sanders is as a player. A lot of analysts seem to think he's very similar to what Dak Prescott would kind of be as at an NFL level. So I think all those relationships definitely come into play. There's a lot of nepotism when it comes to coaching and relationships with players that they've played with. And so I could definitely see it there. And he was the other option that I had in consideration. I think it's kind of narrowed down between 3 players, which would be Abdul Carter, Shedeur Sanders, and then Travis Hunter. I really don't see them going after anybody else. I tend to think that Cam Ward is almost locked in, not 100%, but he'll probably be there in my final mock draft. So I think those 3 players that I just mentioned are who Cleveland's looking at there at 2.
One other thing I want to add on Shedeur too. So something that's kind of been coming to light. He didn't work out at all at the combine. Didn't do any of the tests. Now in the pro day, not doing any of the tests, not doing any of the combine stuff. Like, I think there's 2 ways to look at it. Does he have a promise? Like, does he already know that he's going top 3 no matter what? Or does he just not give a fuck? Like, is he just like, I don't care. Like, I'll figure it out later. I tend to think it's the former. I tend to think it's like he just knows the Browns, Giants, or whatever Titans are going to pick him. I don't know. Any thoughts there from either of you guys?
I completely agree. I think Dad's too involved, understands the process and the system too much to have him kind of have just a fucking DGAF attitude, right? Like there has to be some sort of advice there that is steering him in the right direction. So I think he knows that he just doesn't have to, right? He doesn't have to bother because he's not falling really outside the top 3.
And let's remember, Dion blew off a lot of his combine stuff back when he was a player as well. The big concern for Shedeur is I don't think his arm talent is quite where it needs to be. There's been some video out there him working out with Cam Ward, and Cam Ward, just looking completely better throwing the ball. Yeah. And I think when it came down to doing things at the combine, I don't think he wanted to be overshadowed by either Cam Ward or either Jackson Dart or some of the other quarterbacks behind him with the throwing. And I think when it comes down to it, like you said, at the pro day, I think he's getting, the guidance from his dad to basically stand on his name and stand on the, what they've built there at Colorado with Dion. So I think he's definitely being guided by his dad as far as what to do and the relationships that, Dion has with the NFL and some of these other coaches within the league. I think it puts Shedeur in a different situation than many other prospects will ever be in.
Yeah. I don't want to overread the Myles Garrett video, but I think it really genuinely matters. We're talking about a player that was definitely positioning himself to get out of the building and to get back and to stay in. There's definitely discussions internally for him to try to want to be involved in the future of the franchise, right? Not making decisions, but like keep me in the loop. And there's no scenario where his response is because they're bringing Russell Wilson in, right? Like you just signed a contract extension. You can't feel great about the future of the position. You might feel great about maybe a stopgap for this year, but like in terms of the future of the position, for you to feel good about taking that money and re-signing somewhere, that's a bringing in a rookie to me very, very clearly. So I think it does, matter. That's, part of draft season and doing this is definitely some, tea leaf reading. And I think that's a good early nugget that we have that can kind of help form some of the rest of this too. And then there's kind of a trickle down effect, because I think we're all in consensus that there is a clear top 4, not in terms of like necessarily where we have, if we were doing big boards, that we would have Shedeur Sanders inside that, but like if he's in the mix, really that next, I guess, top 3 of Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter shake out pretty clearly behind that. Decent, I guess, free agent period for the Giants at 3. They still have a quarterback issue to address. They're obviously still in the mix for Aaron Rodgers or whatever happens there. Russell Wilson sweepstakes, right? There seem to be maybe some stopgap situations going on there. They do have a pretty heavy investment in edge rusher. with Kayvon Thibodeau and the Brian Burns signing last year. It doesn't necessarily preclude them from drafting Abdul Carter, but they do have massive needs at corner. Even though they have, I think, some answers, and they've extended, Slayton, and obviously with Malik Neighbors. Travis Hunter feels like more of a fit for me for the Giants than Abdul Carter. Connor, do you have any thoughts on what we see from the Giants at 3, with the assumption here that we have Ward and Shedeur Sanders going ahead?
Yeah, because I like where Scott went. If he's there at 3, I think he's probably an auto pick for them.
I agree.
But if he's not there, yeah, I think you got to bring in another difference maker with Travis Hunter. I mean, at this point, we talked about it before, but like there are a couple of GMs who are desperate and teams that are desperate, and the Giants are certainly one of them. So, they just need talent who can show up right away. Like they can't afford to draft an offensive lineman or anything like, maybe, or even just a prospect that might take time to develop. Like they need a guy who they can throw out there all the time. And Travis Hunter fits that, to a T. Like you want a guy who could maybe play both sides of the ball. I mean, they might be desperate enough to just throw him out there the entire game. Like, honestly, like just right off the bat, I have no idea, because they legit have just so much below replacement level talent that any kind of injection of anything is what they need, on both sides. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense over in Abdul Carter, especially with how their team is built, which is interesting because, again, Abdul could go 1, could go 4, like it, could go all over the place.
Yeah, not going after 4, I don't think. Scott,
No,
any thoughts on? Yeah, I know we're deviating from your mock currently, but if we were to happen to have Cam and Sanders 1, 2, what do you think the Giants would then do at 3?
Yeah, I think Hunter makes the most sense. People are fawning over the talent and the fact that he was a two-way player, but also with the Giants, like they just need an influx of talent. The fact that the wide receiver market has been so bare and they spent like $10 to $12 million on Darius Slayton on retaining him this year goes to show exactly how desperate that front office and the coaching staff there is. So I think Travis Hunter would go ahead and make the most sense. And if they still wanted to address the quarterback, I think they would be going to a veteran quarterback and maybe trying to move up in the back end of the first half to get a guy like Jackson Dart or somebody like that if they are to miss out on Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward there early in the first 3 picks.
Yeah, it makes more sense to me than Carter. New England then subsequently runs to the podium and gets the Abdul Carter selection in there, in my opinion. I think that they do that with either Hunter or Carter. But Scott, I'm going to go back to you because in your mock, you had Hunter still on the board, but you had the Patriots addressing offensive line. And I don't disagree that's a massive, massive issue. Armand Mendu just continues to climb. I think did my mock maybe 3 weeks ago now, and it felt like at the time when I had Mendu in the top 10, felt a little racy compared to where he had been at the time, and now it feels like just almost consensus. I mean, looking at the last handful of mocks, it looks like 13, 14. I mean, he was, let's see, Kuiper had him 11 yesterday, Jeremiah at 7. So, he's definitely in this mix. We have seen him mocked to New England, not just yourself. Talk to me a little bit about the thought process on New England skipping Travis Hunter and going offensive line.
It comes down to multiple things. First and foremost, let me address Will Campbell at LSU. I don't think that all teams are sold on him being an offensive tackle. I think some teams can have him slotted at guard. So for him to be the first tackle off the board, I don't think that's a sure thing. I think the fact that Mendu can play multiple positions makes him a safer pick. But specifically when it comes to what we're looking at with the Patriots, they need an influx of talent both along the offensive line, and they need to get some weapons. How beat up your young quarterback got last year and Drake May, I think you have to look at that and address that going forward. And Vrabel just kind of strikes me as a guy that's going to want to build from the trenches as far as like the defense and stuff go. And you've got some guys in this mock draft, in this draft class, like Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka. You've got some of these guys that aren't necessarily settled with exactly where they're going to go. With the talent that's there and how the draft's kind of falling, I can see, New England possibly pivoting, taking who they think is the best offensive lineman and trying to address one of those wide receiver or offensive weapon positions there early in round 2, or even maybe trade up to the back end of round 1 to make sure that they get their guy. So that was just kind of the thought process that I had. Mendu from everything that I'm hearing is a guy who's been flying up boards. He had some injury concerns that kind of like kept him from really being able to work out and do some of the things that he wanted there early in the draft process. But the more you hear around league circles is that many teams are high on him and have him as first offensive lineman off the board. And if the Patriots plan to address the situation strategically the way I laid out, I think he's the guy.
Yeah, I like it. Like the positional versatility would make a ton of sense. Definitely a guy screaming up, big boards and such. They just need talent overall too. I like the Carlton Davis signing for New England. Carlton Davis has never played, I think, more than 13 games in his career. So like just really hard to trust you're going to get a full slate of action from Carlton Davis. Never happened. I remember, but it's the same thing with both Jamal Dean and Carlton Davis every year in Tampa. It's like, oh yeah, they got great corners, but they're going to miss a month at some point in the season. It just happens every single year. So it feels good to have him there now, but still Travis Hunter having a little bit of flexibility. Just a team that needs talent. Any team that needs talent on both sides of the ball, they need a guy that can play two ways. It's New England. They're still like massively devoid of any talent, and offensive line is where they need a ton of help there too. It makes a lot of sense. What are we looking at? Is there first offensive lineman off the board anywhere yet?
Yeah, it's
you seen that
like minus 175 to minus 180.
Yeah. So pretty terrible odds currently.
Yeah, he was they were even money like maybe a week ago or so, but rightfully so. I think someone got ahead of the steam here and all the news you guys mentioned, just with like kind of Membu steaming up, Campbell, some questions around arm length and all that. He just seems like more of a, I don't know, 10 to 18, 10 to 20 kind of guy than like like starting his range at like 4, where I think Membu could legit go if, again, I'll pray for you if that happens, Noonan, and you don't land one of Carter or Travis Hunter. But I mean, hey, if Shadur Sanders falls, it's not crazy for them to go Membu instead.
Agreed. Some interesting prices based off of what we just talked about, looking at it currently. So first non-quarterback drafted, which we kind of discussed the possibility of being Travis Hunter, plus 275 for Travis Hunter, first non-QB drafted. Not terrible. Some other, I guess, variations of this. Giants are currently minus 600 to take a quarterback. We snatched them basically from the Giants. Corner, again, of them classifying Travis Hunter as a corner is plus 350 for the Giants to take corner first. So not awful, but starting to get a sense of maybe some stuff to sprinkle on or have a look. And the same thing, New England first player drafted defensive line and edge is plus 550. So again, if we go quarterback Travis Hunter, obviously offensive lineman still in the mix. I think like plus 250 or so, but the thought process of them not passing on Abdul Carter at 4 plus 550 for New England to land him, I think is not awful early in the draft process. You're starting to build out a portfolio. I think those are some variations of markets that I think make sense based off of some of the discussions that we just had. So again, early, 6 weeks out, but starting to look at prices.
What did let's see here. I think also team to draft Travis Hunter, Giants plus 320. It's available at a couple of spots. That's interesting. Also, I think some of these too, like if something were to happen with, I don't know, Aaron Rodgers or something like that, like I think it's definitely possible that, I mean, again, you should just try and like run to these books and tweet this out or like bet it, eventually not tweet it out. Sorry. I was just thinking about something else there. Yeah, no, would run, bet it as much as possible. And, go
and never tweet it out.
Never tweet it out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. So it's starting to look, I mean, again, DraftKings first, again, they'll always have typically the best markets. Just again, it's early in the process, late in the process, very hard to do anything off of it, but starting to track that and get a sense of what can happen at other books, I think is pretty interesting. Just going to kick it back to you. Talk to me about anything you want to talk about, and maybe the top 10 of what you've done mock wise. You landed Ashton Jeanty at the Raiders, the same as what Connor and I have done. There's more discussion on, Jeanty not making it past the Bears, even at 10, with how the Bears offseason has gone so far. Anything you want to do in the top 10? Talk to us about it.
Yeah, I think the match of Junty to the Raiders, to me, what I'm looking at and what I think makes sense is the team just has no offensive identity. Devontae Adams left, last year and via trade to go link up with Rodgers, and now he's in with the Rams, and that whole running back committee last year for the Raiders was just a mess, whether you're talking fantasy or real life or otherwise. It was just a constant rotation of subpar performers and talents. And John T's a guy who people have compared, not style wise to Barry Sanders, but being one of the best running back prospects since Barry Sanders. And even some of these other guys that have come out, he rates very highly. And if he is as good as what everybody seems to think he is, he's, a foundational piece for a team that really doesn't have many outside of Max Crosby. You start looking at the trade for Geno Smith. So, you've kind of solved the quarterback issue, but outside of that, this team needs some offensive line help. They really need some better weapons, outside of the tight end. But they need to start building something that can compete. And they're in a division where you can't consistently, not score points against, the rest of the AFC West. So they need somebody that's going to help them score points. They need help on both sides of the ball, but I just think Genty is the guy that they can get the most bang for their buck here as far as on the field.
Yeah, hard to argue with that. Connor, are you okay with Ted McMillan's 40 time? A lot of discussion in the last 48 hours of big body receiver running, north of a 4.5. We haven't seen a lot of early investment of that. You're seeing a wide array of where he's coming off the board. It was very much top 10 early, shifted a little bit more towards the bottom. You'll see him fall in the 20s in some mocks, but personally, you got a dude that big that moves really well. Doesn't jump off on the tape that he's slow. Sometimes, I guess we get so locked into these 40 times in athletic testing. It's like this dude's pretty damn good in college. Where are you at with him now? I mean, we're seeing anywhere between 4 and 30 in mock drafts over the last month.
Insane range. Jeremiah has him at 22, Kuiper at 20. I don't think that my thing of 26 is as crazy in hindsight as it, once looked. I mean, I think the 40 time is fine. I just don't like him very much as a player. He just is a big dude who doesn't separate, which is possible. You can win in other ways. It's just not something that, I don't know. It just seems like something that I wouldn't draft in the top 10 and doesn't make sense to me in the top 10. But now I've seen people be like, there's no way he falls past 8. I've seen some people say, which again, I think that the team's opinions of him will probably vary widely. And I would probably have him going somewhere in the teens. I don't know. First off, the 40 time of the pro day didn't run at the combine, now runs reported 4.48. And then all the other people were saying, no, it was no lower than 4.55. That was basically the other team said that, which at a pro day, again, is not that good. It's like usually, I think maybe it was Larky or someone did the research on it. It's usually a 0.05 difference between pro day and combine or whatever, because just the way they again, they can shift the field, it's measured the way it's 40 is measured, sometimes pretty suspect. So I don't know, does that even matter? I think to your point, probably not, but I'm definitely not going to have him in my top 10 unless I see something that says this team loves him in the top 10. Yeah, I'm out on him. I don't know. I'm a Ted hater. Maybe it's I don't know. I feel like I'm planting a flag for not really much of a reason other than he's going really high in everyone's mocks, and I don't like him that much.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, look, there's confirmation in that based off of the wider range of mocks too, right? So I do think it's going to be team specific, but I think this continues to be a theme here in the draft is you're going to start to see just a lot of variation all over the map. You start to see some discrepancies at the position. You've seen some receivers climb up ahead, whether it's Golden more so has been kind of the one as of late that's been grabbing a little steam. Seemed to be maybe the tight end market was kind of collapsing a little bit, Scott, but now it feels like pretty clearly, and the markets will tell us this too, that is definitely Tyler Warren over Colston Loveland in terms of we're looking at first tight end off the board. DraftKings currently has Warren minus 550 to be the first tight end off the board. Loveland 3-1. That's reflected in your mock. I think Connor and I had the same, but it felt like it was kind of closer Maybe it's part of it is just finding that second team, in the top 20 or so that needs a tight end, especially now that, the Broncos were a team that people were mocking tight end to. They've addressed it with Evan Ingram. Any thoughts on Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland?
Yeah, I think Tyler Warren's very clearly going to be the tight end one in this draft class. I've seen some other mock drafts out there with Warren going as high as 7 to the Jets. So that's kind of interesting, sitting there looking at it. But it's like you kind of just addressed a little bit. I have a hard time really slotting Loveland into the bottom part of this first round. You start looking at some of the teams, that he would kind of fit in. The Chargers kind of make the most sense with the little bit of a Michigan connection. They have a need for tight end, but when you start looking at it, you've got Green Bay, you've got Minnesota. They both have tight ends. Houston, I think offensive line is definitely more of a pressing need for them. The Rams could possibly use a tight end. Baltimore's got good tight ends. Detroit doesn't really need one. Washington just, re-signed Ertz and drafted a tight end last year. Buffalo, Kansas City, like all these teams down here at the bottom end of the bottom third of the first round, nobody really needs a tight end. So with tight end traditionally being a position that'll kind of slip outside of the first round, it's going to be interesting really to do a little bit more research to find out how teams feel on Loveland and see which teams are meeting with him to kind of figure out a better place for me to go ahead and slot him, as far as matching him with the team and here in the first round.
Yeah, it's a little tricky, Connor. Seattle would be a possibility. They need offensive lineup so badly though, too, right? So it's like, these are the things too where you can just see, hey, you can see the Bengals just, hey, we're going all in. Like we're gonna try to beat the shit out of you 50-45 every day, right? It's just kind of our best opportunity. But like you make a great point. You have to try to match that need. It would be surprising. We haven't seen him outside of the first round, and it's slipping a little bit. You're seeing more high 20s than you were earlier because he was typically mid-teens or so. But Connor, anything to add to this one?
I think it was McShay mentioned like that the Jets are really interested in him. I mean, or Tyler Warren, sorry, not Colton Loveland.
Okay.
So I think that it is kind of a domino effect to what Scott was saying. Like if Warren goes, 7, like Loveland could go 9 or 10 or 12 or 14, to any of those teams. If Warren goes like 14, there's kind of like that dead zone of teams where it's like, does that really make sense? I don't really know. And yeah, I don't know. I like Scott. I have a hard time believing that Loveland would go before Warren, but I think that it matters because like, again, if Warren goes early, I think Loveland probably follows, maybe 6-7 picks after probably.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, but that does feel like he's starting to separate, and the market indicates that very, very much as well. A couple secondary discussions that I think are really interesting. I think could be really team driven too. This is another one of these pieces of this draft, both at corner and at safety, stylistically in terms of who these players are coming off the board first, whether it's Will Johnson, at corner where you could definitely see the kid from Texas is definitely really excited as well. Jahad Barron. And then at safety, those two safeties are very different stylistically. It's felt like Malachi Starks was falling a little bit, and then Jeremiah comes out and puts him at 13, which feels different and looks different comparatively to where we've seen him. We've seen him left out of first rounds. We've seen him, to the very, very bottom 5 of some drafts, coming off of, obviously a fantastic, fantastic combine. For the kid from South Carolina, Emawari, like who just it's kind of a freak, but very much a like in the box, cover one type, basically faux linebacker, right? That's not for everyone stylistically. I'm interested to see how that kind of shakes out because I think there could be some, I don't know. I think there's just some variance in the market depending on where those guys go. Do you have any thoughts on that, Scott, in terms of corner or safety, in terms of the stylistic piece of how those two, the corners too, like very much a, Will Johnson very much wasn't asked to play man. So I don't want to say that he can't play man, but very much was asked to play zone, where you see a little bit more from Barron at Texas.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I kind of hit on every year is when it comes to secondary pieces, you really have to look at how they're going to match up with the teams and the defenses that are going to draft them. Not every cornerback is for every team, even if they run and test, very similarly. And it's the same thing with these safeties. These safeties are two completely different pieces, and not every team. You're going to have some teams that run too high. You're going to have some teams that run one high, and you really have to ask yourself, how many times do you see a safety make a huge impact? Usually I tend to rank safety down the board a bit, as far as first round priorities and stuff like that. But like specifically with Ammanwori, he is going to have to go to a team that is going to value him being in the box and value specifically what he does. I tend to think as athletically as he tested, he still looks a little bit stiff at times. So you really have to look at depth charts if you're trying to get Ammanwori in the first round and link him specifically to a team and look at who the other safety is. I think he's going to be a more in the box safety, somebody that's playing kind of similar to like what a Jeremy Chin did, and that could possibly fit in Washington, who lost Jeremy Chin. They signed Will Harris, but he's more of a depth piece. He's not going to play exact same style. So, those are just some thoughts and some things that you have to look at when you're trying to play secondary pieces and match them to teams within the first round of the draft.
Yeah, it gets hard. Connor, anything to add on safeties, cornerback discussion?
Yeah, there's a market on FanDuel right now. First defensive back drafted, not including Travis Hunter, which is kind of fun that they added that, as well as first defensive lineman not drafted, not including Abdul Carter. So they're trying to give other people a chance, which is cool, and make it like a real market. Right now, we're looking at Barron and Will Johnson both plus 115, Ammanwori plus 750, Malachi Starks plus 750. I think Will Johnson's a pretty solid play there. Because again, I would just be surprised to see Ammanwori or Starks climb up there. So it's basically just Barron versus Johnson. And we're looking at the mock drafts right now. Like Barron on average, his average is 20. Johnson's average is 13. Johnson's average is 5 to 24. Barron's range is 11 to 34. So, I mean, feels like probably should be like minus, I don't know, 130 Will Johnson and maybe plus 150-ish Barron at this point. I'm not sold on it, but I think that's kind of an interesting look right now, based on kind of what we know. And I think Scott, you had him with the 49ers, or Will Johnson, the 49ers. I think that's kind of an interesting fit. I don't know, Noonan, does that make sense defensively?
I had Barron to the 49ers.
You had Barron to the 49ers. Okay.
Yep. So yeah, I don't hate it, which is very interesting. We were touching on it before the show. Both of the Walter football guys, Walter and Charlie, there's obviously, you look down, there's some succinct spots. They both have Will Johnson 6 to the Raiders, which is not nothing. And sometimes it caught our eyes to see if there's something there. That's definitely driving, I think, the average Will Johnson spot too. Also, one of them, I believe, Walter left Barron out of his first round, which is very strange considering he's 11 to the Niners on Jeremiah's mock yesterday as well. So aligned with Jeremiah is a good spot. He actually had Barron ahead of Will Johnson. Kuiper had them flip-flopped, but Barron going a little bit later. But I think they're both really good. I think Will Johnson had a down year, but I think some of that Michigan defense overall had a down year. But again, like I think they're both really talented. They're both going in the first round. But I like the FanDuel has given us those different markets so that we can still kind of bet into some of these spots where there's a clear one at the position to kind of make it a little bit interesting. So it's just interesting. I do think Johnson or Barron are the way to go there. Again, Starks is an outlier with what Jeremiah did yesterday in his mock, having him 13. So it does feel like who takes the first corner situation. So definitely an interesting market to take a look at.
And Walter and Charlie too are like generally very plugged in with the Raiders. I think I don't know if they've gotten it right every year, but it's been like directionally correct pretty frequently for the Raiders. So it's definitely worth noting that they both have him there, and they both have Genty at 12, I believe, as well. So I don't know. Interesting. Curious what's going on there behind the scenes. So
yeah, definitely something to take a look at. One of the guys that's been flying up draft boards, not super surprising, Jahad Campbell. We have a lot of these guys in this draft where they're maybe spend some time at off-ball linebacker. Maybe they project a little bit more moving forward to be edge rushers. I think you see that with the two Georgia prospects as well in the top. We've seen this, kind of changing in years past. I'm excited to see Campbell. Campbell going 9 to Jeremiah is really, really interesting. Again, guy who spent a lot of time in the 20s and high teens, but we see these massive shifts from Jeremiah from previous mocks into new ones. I think should get our attention in terms of when we're starting to look at over-unders on these guys. Feels like there's some information there on Jeremiah's side when we see those drastic shifts. One of those guys that I just mentioned was from Michael Williams from Georgia, who I haven't seen him as low as you have him, Scott. Was that he kind of fell and you knew you needed him in the first round situation? Again, I'm not critiquing the mock draft thing is so hard. But Williams, anywhere from 8, Kyber had him at 10. Jeremiah had him all the way down to 28. Young prospect, played hurt last year. But definitely more of a shirts and t-shirt guy than even Jalen Walker, who tested better as well. Any thoughts on Walker or Williams there from Georgia?
Yeah, just when it comes to Williams, I've heard through some of the research I've done, just some rumblings that he didn't perform quite as well when they start digging into some of the film and stuff. That they're not as excited with some of his bursts and some of the other things. And I'm hearing that he's kind of falling down draft boards right now. That's a little bit reflected with Jeremiah, but he's also not a scheme fit for every single team as well. So you have to look at, how's he going to hold up against the run in some circumstances for teams that want to play, 3-4 versus 4-3. And that's more of the situation. I think I slotted him there with Philadelphia, kind of replacing Brandon Graham, where, look, Philadelphia's drafted a lot of Georgia players over the last few years, and they tend to go ahead and use players as far as their pass rush and rotation. So I kind of thought he'd be a decent fit there. And I didn't want to slot him outside of the first round, and I thought it was a decent fit for if he does slide. I think specifically when we start talking about edge, there's a lot of edge rushers here in the first round. I think it's one of the more depth pieces of the draft, and you're going to have teams like Cincinnati, who's probably going to end up losing, Trey Hendrickson via trade after signing both of the wide receivers. There's going to be some teams, and I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are looking for edge, and you have to kind of start piecing together who fits and how they fit within the schemes of the defense. So I think Mikel it just ends up sliding a little bit for me in comparison to some of these other guys that I have in the first round.
Yeah, I think he's really interesting. I mean, definitely played hurt. I mean, he's 20 years old. Was mixing in and playing really good ball at 18, in the SEC, and I think that typically translates pretty well. But I mean, maybe there's definitely something to that, because I don't think the tape is as good as maybe his peers, and in a spot where, to your point, it is a loaded edge class. We have some off the field question marks with a couple of them too, and how teams navigate that is going to be impactful as well. But again, it just adds to the point at the top, guys. Just so much variance in terms of where some of these guys can go. I would not be shocked for Mikel Williams to be a top 10 pick. And it sounds like he very much could be edge 8 on someone's board. I mean, there are a legit 10 defensive linemen at least that could go in the first round here, depending on how you classify some of these off-ball linebackers and edge rushers and stuff like that is crazy. Any thoughts, Scott, on a couple of the off-the-field stuff issues that we touched on last time? Some questions and concerns with Mike Green, out of Marshall. Some not great rumors there. Same thing with James Pierce out of Tennessee, who also I think has some pretty good tape. But if there's transferring from schools and got in trouble, and you got in trouble in a new school, some of these things are going to be problematic for some teams. These dudes will be high on some boards and not on some boards at all.
Yeah, I think as far as Green, you had Green who kind of was trending very up, into the top 10 to 12. I think a lot of teams liked him, and I think some of the off the field concerns have kind of like slotted him kind of back, maybe 10 picks into the 20-ish range. Pierce is the one that I think most teams, from what I understand, have the most concerns about, and could find himself as being a player that could drop outside of the first round. I think from a talent standpoint, and even from what he put up at the combine, I think he is first round worthy as far as being a talent. But you really have to dig into, what the off-field concerns are and how teams are going to navigate that, or is completely different from team to team. You have some teams that are building a culture and don't want that type of player, and then you have some teams that think that their culture can go ahead and bring a player like that into the fold and have it work out and support him with a good environment and good teammates around him. So it's all different, whenever you have that. I tend to push players that have that type of concern down, maybe like 5 picks, but it's just one of those things where you don't know how teams are going to react. So you really have to go ahead and project the talent rather than, how a team's going to react to the possible off-field concerns. Now, granted, if it's, pending litigation and pending legal concerns, that, that will drop players down, out of the first round and whatnot. But, some of the stuff that goes on in college and transfers and stuff that's already put behind them, teams will navigate completely differently team to team.
Yeah, it's tricky. Interesting to see Pierce, sliding, not even in Jeremiah's first round now. Kuiper had him down at 28. You see some other ones that have come out in the last couple of weeks. He is off the board there as well. So again, we'll reference Charlie and Walter Football. Both have Mike Green and Matthew Golden out of their first round, which is, again, kind of unique there as well. Anything else that's caught your eye here in the last week or two since we last spoke, Connor, that you want to touch on? Maybe, moving up, moving down, anything in the, middle to the end of the first round?
So Jihad Campbell got surgery today, or got labrum surgery after the combine, which, I mean, I'm sure Jeremiah knew about. It was just clarified today, but I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm curious to see how that impacts mocks going forward. It's just a labrum surgery, so there's not like a ton of, shoulder labrum surgery too. So it's not a ton of concern long term, but I don't know. I mean, definitely not something you want if you're picking someone in the top 10 to be recovering from surgery in the offseason. I don't know if you touched on Shamar Stewart.
No, I mean, Combine Darling seemed to be flying up mocks since left, and then you've seen a little bit of stalling out there too.
Yeah, 32nd and Jeremiah's mock. I mean, that's just wild. His range is 7 to 32 on VR's mock. Again, more of just one of the craziest, I don't know. This is some of the craziest, ranges that I can remember for a lot of these guys here. There's just a lot of tough guys to slot in. I don't know. There could be some wild. I mean, we already see at the end of the first round some really interesting picks that no one's expecting. I think we saw, what was it, Ricky Pearsall last year snuck into the first round, that he was I don't know, maybe a mid-second round pick, most people thought. Xavier Legette, I think that they traded up for him, right? The last pick of the first round. I mean, First off, terrible, terrible pick. Thank God we got Eager over there helping him out. I mean, that was a bad pick from day one. So, but yeah, my point is that
Cooper DeJean not going in the first round, which busted a lot of my first round parlay action, which is, again, awful at the time, egregious now that we know what a dog Cooper DeJean is. So just insane.
It's our ball knowing takes where, I know betters. We're actually much better than our draft betting I know betters, because our draft betting IKBs did not turn out as great as the ball knowing ones. But yeah, my point is what guy in the 40s is going to be a first round pick? That's what, it's going to be wild, because that's going to be someone where when we get to be a first round pick market, I'm interested to see how they price it, because I have a feeling that they're going to screw us. But there could be some really interesting down the board long shots, just because, again, there's so much uncertainty after the first I don't know, 6-7 picks basically.
Yeah, hopefully, which we won't get, but theoretically, getting a yes/no market on some of these would be wild too, because you could see such a range for some of these dudes. I mean, almost play that self out in an over and under. But yeah, to your point, I think, what's the number now? We touched on it last time we met. We've seen 57 guys mocked in the first round in some way, shape, or form in the industry over the last month. 57. That's wild, right? There's only a couple of those have been one or two, right? You see most of these guys in a handful of mocks. So it's just really, really tough. You've seen some of the post combine bumps, like at corner with Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky. You've seen more of the Thomas kid from Florida State. Both those guys were in Kiper and Jeremiah's mock after really not being in much of any of them. So this is kind of what happens where you think you have an understanding, but this year I feel like we were all understanding there's a little bit more variance than normal. So Donovan Ezeuruke, the kid from BC, is also climbing. Has gone from like not in any mocks, and then you see Jeremiah's at 19. Right, that's alarming. You're hearing a lot of good things about that, character, right, from him too, right? So if you're trying to make a decision between Ezeuruke and Pierce at the same position, you don't think the game film is significantly different. You got a guy who people love as a leader, stayed at BC, even though he could have transferred probably anywhere. Kind of galvanize that team in that locker room. And then, who knows what's going on with the other guys. Those things get pretty interesting. You're having to make those decisions at the end. So, Scott, any other sharing notes that you have? Maybe anything you've heard or anything else at the back end of your mock that you want to give to us before we take off?
Yeah, two players, both from Ole Miss, that I think that you really have to start looking at. And look, we talked about it last year with Bo Nix, and a lot of people didn't think Bo Nix was a first-round quarterback. I think Jackson Dart is that player this year that either sneaks into the first round or, kind of shakes up some things. But, the one player that I'm kind of looking at, I track visits, from the Senior Bowl and before some of the other bowls and stuff all through the combine. And the one player, when we start talking about somebody who can sneak into the first round, that's getting a lot of buzz and a lot of teams are doing their due diligence on, is the cornerback out of Ole Miss, Trey Amos. He's been all over the place. Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky is kind of the other cornerback, along with Zaria Thomas from Florida State. But specifically, Amos has been one of the players that's met with more teams than any of the other players throughout the combine and top 30 and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of buzz on him. I think a lot of teams are doing their due diligence, and along with Donovan Ezeuruke, that as far as a couple of players that can slide in right there the last like 5 picks in the first round. So those are some of the guys that I would keep an eye on. But when it comes to Jackson Dart, you've got the Giants, you've got Pittsburgh, you've got the Browns, you've got some of these teams that just have an unsettled quarterback situation, and somebody is going to find themselves as the odd team out. And I think you're going to have to address a young player like Jackson Dart, who has fans in some circles and he has some detractors in others. So it's not a clean evaluation. But the same way that Bo Nix didn't fit everybody's, picks and schemes and stuff, he very much fit, what Sean Payton wanted to do in Denver. I think you're going to have the same type of situation there with Jackson Dart. And I think he'll find himself, trending close to the first round. But I think you still have to have some of these veteran quarterbacks shake out and find themselves to teams before you can start feeling good about where to project them.
Yeah, it's an interesting call up for sure. I mean, Jackson Dart very much not in the mix for a while, and now Kiper's got him at 9. So it's kind of speaks to the just wild part of this process. You did have Amos 26 to Jeremiah in his latest mocks. And one thing that kind of sticks out to me when we're looking at the last few mock drafts that have come through, it's not necessarily the player, but like we've seen Staten, the Seattle guy who's typically dialed in. He's got cornerback Harrison going 26 to the Rams. Kiper's got Thomas, corner out of Florida State, going 26 to the Rams. Jeremiah has Amos, corner, going 26 to the Rams. Walter and Charlie have a corner going 26 to the Rams. Rams currently right now plus 220 to draft a corner first. It's been a problem for them for a very long time. I think they had 25 million invested defensively, 25 million less than the next closest team. Like they need to start, they've poured a lot into the defensive front in the draft in the last couple of years. They need to start investing a little bit more into the secondary, and that would make a lot of sense. And we're starting to see that thread link through mocks that have come through lately. So these are the little things that we need to be picking up on now to see if there's, if this trend continues. Does that match any other noise that we hear? Because we start picking off some of these lines as we start to develop a little bit of a portfolio as we get closer, because we're getting there closer. So All right, everyone head over to 4for4.com. Check out Scott's latest mock draft. I'm sure Connor and I will have 2.0 sooner than later. If you want to get a subscription, 4for4.com/plans. Still pumping out golf content, NBA, absolutely cruising. Get in the Discord, locked in, and look, get ready for the draft stuff too. Get in there and get those notifications turned on. And when we start pumping out actual picks, those will go in the Discord for subscribers before they pop up on any of these shows. So move the line wherever you listen to podcasts. 4for4 bets on the YouTube channel. So for Connor and Scott, I'm Ryan. We'll see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.